$1.87. That was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by haggling with the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher, until her cheeks burned with embarrassment. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87. And the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing left to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and cry, so Della did. Which reminds us that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles happening most often. While she cried, let's take a look at their home. A furnished apartment for $8 a week. In the hallway below was a letterbox that no letter would ever go into, and an electric button that no one could ever get to ring. There was also a little card with the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham part was from a time when he made $30 a week. Now, with his income down to $20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred, as if they were thinking of shrinking to just a simple D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home, he was just Jim, and was hugged tightly by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, who you now know as Della. Della finished her cry and powdered her face. She stood by the window and looked out at a gray cat walking on a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow was Christmas Day, and she only had $1.87 to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny for months, and this was all she had. $20 a week just doesn't go very far. She had spent so many happy hours planning to get something nice for him. Something fine and rare, something almost worthy of being owned by Jim. Between the windows was a tall, thin mirror. A very slender person could, by looking at their reflection in quick succession, get a pretty good idea of what they looked like. Della, being slim, had mastered this art. Suddenly, she turned from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining, but her face had lost its color. Quickly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now, the James Dillingham Youngs had 2 possessions they were incredibly proud of. One was Jim's gold watch, which had belonged to his father and his grandfather. The other was Della's hair. If the Queen of Sheba had lived across the way, Della would have let her hair hang out the window to dry just to make the Queen's jewels look cheap. And if King Solomon had been the building manager, with all his treasures piled in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see the king tug at his beard in envy. So now Della's beautiful hair fell around her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown water. It reached below her knee and was almost like a piece of clothing. Then she nervously put it back up. She hesitated for a moment, and a tear or two splashed onto the worn red carpet. She put on her old brown jacket and her old brown hat. With a whirl of her skirts and that brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she rushed out the door and down the stairs to the street. She stopped at a sign that read, Madame Sofroni. Hair goods of all kinds. Della ran up one flight of stairs, panting. Madame, a large, pale, and chilly woman, hardly seemed like a Sofroni. Will you buy my hair? Della asked. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a look. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the hair with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. The next 2 hours flew by. She searched every store for Jim's present. She found it at last. It was surely made for Jim and no one else. It was a platinum watch chain, simple and elegant in its design. It was worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew it had to be Jim's. It was like him, quiet and valuable. They took $21 from her for it, and she hurried home with 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim could proudly check the time in any company. As grand as the watch was, he often looked at it secretly because he used an old leather strap instead of a chain. When Della got home, she felt a little less excited and a bit more sensible. She took out her curling irons, lit the gas, and started to fix the damage done by generosity mixed with love. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered in tiny, close-lying curls that made her look like a runaway schoolboy. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look, he'll say I look like a chorus girl. But what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was hot, ready for the pork chops. Jim was never late. Della held the watch chain in her hand and sat near the door. Then she heard his step on the stairs. She turned white for a moment. She had a habit of saying little silent prayers, and now she whispered, Please, God, make him think I'm still pretty. The door opened and Jim stepped in. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow. He was only 22 and already had a family to support. He needed a new overcoat and didn't have gloves. Jim froze inside the door. His eyes were fixed on Della, with an expression she couldn't understand, and it terrified her. It wasn't anger, or surprise, or disapproval. He just stared at her with that strange look on his face. Della jumped up and went to him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't get through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you." "You've cut off your hair?" Jim asked as if he was struggling to process the obvious. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well? I'm still me without my hair, aren't I?" Jim looked around the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" he said, almost sounding confused. "You don't need to look for it," Della said. "It's sold, I tell you, sold and gone. It's Christmas Eve. Be good to me because it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered," she said with a sudden sweet seriousness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Jim seemed to wake up from his trance. He hugged Della. "Let's look away for a moment. $8 a week or $1 million a year, what's the difference?" A mathematician would give you the wrong answer. The wise men, the Magi, brought valuable gifts, but this understanding was not among them. Jim pulled a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it on the table. "Don't make any mistake, Dal," he said. "There's nothing about a haircut that could make me like my girl any less. But if you unwrap that package, you'll see why I was so stunned at first." Nimble white fingers tore at the string and paper. And then a scream of joy. And then a quick change to hysterical tears, requiring Jim to comfort her immediately. For there lay the combs, the set of beautiful tortoiseshell combs with jeweled rims that Della had admired for so long in a shop window. They were the perfect shade for her beautiful, vanished hair. They were expensive, she knew, and she had longed for them without any hope of ever owning them. And now they were hers, but the hair they were meant for was gone. She hugged them to her chest, and finally looked up with misty eyes and a smile. "My hair grows so fast, Jim!" And then Della jumped up and cried, "Oh, oh!" Jim hadn't seen his beautiful present yet. She held it out to him eagerly in her open palm. The precious metal seemed to shine with the reflection of her bright, loving spirit. "Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim sat down on the couch, put his hands behind his head, and smiled. "Dell," he said, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them for a while. They're too nice to use just now. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs, and now why don't you put the chops on?" The Magi, as you know, were wise men who brought gifts to the baby in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. And here I have told you the simple story of two foolish young people who unwisely sacrificed their greatest treasures for each other. But let me say that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, people like them are the wisest. Everywhere, they are the wisest. They are the Magi,